time travel. In tonight's video, we're going to be talking about the scientific reality against the scientific possibility, because time travel might not just be a slightly lazy device used in movies and TV shows. It might actually be based in real science. It actually be based in real science.
That's repeated badly. Hi guys, and welcome to the Mystery Machine. How are we all?
Doing well.
All good.
Excellent. This week I'm joined by Steve for Strange Times as usual, Dave from Dorias Lives as usual, and a special guest star appearance by our Stormy Bear, who's becoming a bit of a regular and a friend of the channel. So howdy, Stormy.
I'm doing well. Are you guys getting a lot of feedback?
Yeah, really. Stormy Bear, who's becoming a bit of a regular and a friend of the channel. So howdy, Stormy.
I'm doing well. Are you guys getting a lot of feedback?
Now, dear Lord, YouTube sucks.
Oh,
Yeah, you need to kill the YouTube volume on the playback on the YouTube channel. Just use StreamYard.
I think that was my fault. I apologize.
Okay,
My,
how are we doing? No, that's awful.
oh, you're still
I
hearing
tell
it?
you what, I think I might do, guys. I might stop the stream and start again because that is really bad. Okay, I can't even hear anyone now. Right, I'm gonna kill
Yeah,
it.
well, nobody's speaking.
Oh. Hey, Dave, I can hear you now.
There we go,
Stormy,
mate.
sound
Yeah,
check.
I'm good.
1, 2, 3,
Sound
4.
check? Sound
No,
check?
Storm Bear sounds like a Teletubby.
I sound like a Teletubby. I sound like a Teletubby.
I'm just gonna remove him. It's because he's caught in a time loop. Let's see if that helps. Oh, we've all moved chairs. Stormy, say
Okay.
something.
I'll say something.
Hey, Stormy
1,
Bear,
2.
we can hear you, everyone.
Oh, oh, good. Good.
Sound is in time. Warp evening, guys. Bazza. Right. So, a little bit of a hiccup there, but we're professionals. We'll just skim past it and and move on. So, welcome to Brief History Mystery and the Mystery Machine channel. If you didn't hear us, welcome to Dave, Steve, and our special guest star, Stormy Bear, friend of the channel now. And this evening we are talking time travel. Of course we are, because you know, it's in the news at the moment. We're not going to talk about the UAP report because that would be boring, and everyone else has already talked about that a great deal. So none of that nonsense this evening. Just time travel. So let's start off with a bit of a chat about like time travel in the movies and things like that, because I'd love to know what sort of times have you seen films or TV shows that you've either loved with time travel in, or that have actually like got it right or horribly got it wrong. Anybody want to jump in?
Back to the Future.
Back to the Future, the classic.
Brilliant film.
When I was growing up, my favorite show was, I don't know if you guys ever saw it over there, but Time Tunnel.
Oh,
It was
God,
like-
I've forgotten about that. That was like
I mean,
Land
it
of Giants and stuff,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it was
same.
like, these two agents, they went, walk into a tunnel and they pop out someplace else and they had all these adventures. And man, I that was my Saturday. Watching that. I mean, I love Time Tunnel. But that was in 1970 something, early
Yeah,
72, 73. And then, of course, there was always Doctor Who.
Yeah. I never liked Doctor
Of
Who.
course. Yeah, no,
I'm
me
a
neither.
massive geek, and I don't like Doctor Who.
Couldn't get into it.
I have a 30-foot scarf, and I met Tom Baker at a convention once upon a time, and he touched it, and he said,
I bet he did. We
Yeah.
heard stories about Tom Baker.
"Oh,
In people's
yeah,
things.
I never had that kind of relationship with him, and I'm kind of disappointed, but okay, fine."
For me, I was always a massive Trekkie. So literally for me, it was sort of like every other week I go, oh, they're going back in time again. That's good.
Oh, yeah,
What
yeah.
plot hole have they got themselves into that they now require time travel to get themselves out of it?
Quantum Leap, that was good. Salmon's
You mentioned that earlier, and I've been singing Quantum Leap theme tune ever since.
go on, sing it.
You know, it's coming back.
Oh, cool.
It's a reboot. Good evening, aliens and stuff. How are you, sir? Tom Baker was not the only good Doctor Who. Right, okay, so quick Doctor Who argument. Eccleston was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair enough to say. He was after Eccleston. He did it for years, and now he's skinny fella.
Tennant.
David Tennant.
David Tennant. David Tennant
He was
the best
good.
Doctor Who.
He was good.
Is anybody hearing me?
Brilliant. Sorry, mate?
Yeah.
You're
Just
dead.
making sure you hear me. I did say David Tennant.
Oh, did you?
Oh, sorry, mate. I didn't hear you.
I didn't know that.
I
Sorry,
like
mate.
Matt Smith as well, actually, to be fair.
Matt
I really
Smith
like
is
Matt Smith. His career's disappeared ever since, hasn't he?
Well, he's been in The Crown on Netflix's Crown.
Oh, I didn't watch that.
He's going to play a Targaryen on the next the prequel to Game of Thrones, so he's doing pretty decent.
Yeah, I've seen that. This is what I like, Baza. He agrees with me. So, David Tennant, number one. Right. How about any like movies and things where they've got the time travel like horribly wrong? What do you think? I think at that Back to the Future has several arguments about how much they messed it up. But actually, I mean, I always thought the actual machine, the actual like DeLorean, was kind of bang on. Other than I'm not quite sure what they like create some sort of wormhole in it and things. And
18
want
miles
to
an hour.
It looked cool, didn't it? It looked cool as well.
yeah,
Back to
I don't
the
think the
Future,
time
I mean,
travel's relevant.
It was just a really fun movie. You know, everybody wanted to be Marty McFly. He had the girl, he had the truck, he had the time machine. I mean, what's not to love? You know.
Exactly. 12 Monkeys was always my favourite, though. And I just feel like we're actually living in 12 Monkeys a little bit. I'm expecting him to like come back through the time and like try to get patient zero, and it feels like we're actually living in it a little bit.
Yeah.
Sapphire and Steel, was that a time travel TV show? I thought that was a cop show. Sapphire and Steel.
I thought it was more of a Mills and Booms type of thing.
No.
I don't think I'm quite old
Neither.
enough for Sapphire and Steel. Possibly.
Sapphire and Steel were cool, yes. Sapphire and Steel were good.
Oh, what's the there's another one that my girlfriend likes. Outlander.
Oh yes, that's it. He travels back in time and it's swords.
Yeah. By the guy that created or ran the show for Deep Space Nine and Battlestar Galactica. That's his name.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's I mean, I've watched a lot of episodes of that, and that's really kind of getting. Now, of course, there's a lot of magic involved. You have to go to these stones. But yeah, you can use the stone network and to shift time into different places. It's really interesting, but I think it's really just like a romance novel with time travel.
Oh, there you go. Then. There has been some really nice rom-coms actually with like time travel. There's like the Time Traveler's Wife. I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's the time traveler and he keeps jumping from time to time, but she's going linear. But he'll appear and like she's 20 and he'll be 40 and then he'll reappear and she's 21 and then he's 21 and he's not met her yet and all this sort of thing. That's a really clever time travel idea.
Yeah, never send him out for milk.
Nah, exactly. He just won't come back. Like my dad. No, not really. My dad's still on mom. Right, guys. So if we talk about like the real science of sort of like time travel and the theories that are actually that this is actually possible, and we've all time traveled a little bit if you've ever been on a plane. So if we talk about that in a sec, and then we're going to unleash Dave because we are going to talk about the Philadelphia experiment, and you can actually see him itching ever so slightly
Revving up
to get stuck in. So I say we've all time traveled a little bit if you've ever been on a plane. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Doing research.
Yeah.
I knew you would still, because your channel is literally called Sideworks, which I would please everybody go and have a look at. By the way.
Thank you. Oh, one last thing about the movies we saw. Well, it's probably the best one on time travel is Interstellar.
I fell asleep in Interstellar, and then I woke up and he was trapped behind a bookcase.
Yeah.
And I never quite understood what the hell was going on. I know they got into a lot of quantum mechanics and things, didn't they? For that?
In terms of like the science behind it, I think that was the most on brand, so to speak. But in terms of it is kind of dragged, and my favorite part of the whole thing was when Okra died planet wide. I'm just not a big fan of Okra. My mother is, and I'm not. But yeah, but in terms of film that got it right, I think Interstellar is probably number one.
And Anne Hathaway's in it. And I might be a little bit in love with Anne Hathaway.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. She's gorgeous. But yeah. So, time travel. we've got this thing that it's sometimes called the twin paradox, but really it should be called like the twin effect, because it's not a paradox, and it is actually a proven event, or a proven thing. So a few years ago, a very clever person invented an atomic clock, the most accurate atomic, most accurate timepiece that you can get. They kept one on the Earth, and they stuck one on a plane. They flew the plane around a bit, and when they came back, the atomic clocks were slightly out of sync. That proved special relativity, basically, as a concept, as a scientific fact. The reason being that the plane, as it's traveling faster, warps space-time occasionally, which we'll probably talk about a bit more in a bit, warps it ever so slightly more than the clock on the Earth. So you actually, time slows down. But it's not really going to affect you a great deal. This isn't like Star Trek, where they keep having to adjust the clocks every time they get to a planet because of temporal warping. It's like, was it like a micron, if that, difference?
Oh yes, it was in sub-nanosecond level. They did this also with Apollo, some of the Apollo missions. I think Skylab, if you remember that back in the 70s, that had an atomic clock on it, I think, as well. And they all, they all had the same measurement outcome, in terms of speed and velocity and all that, and the distance travel, time differential. So. Yeah, it was multiple experiments all confirming each other that the faster you travel, the more time dilation you have with the standard baseline wherever you came from.
Yeah, but if you could actually get a rocket that could shoot off into deep space and get closer to the speed of light, this is where this twin paradox thing comes along. So you can have a pair of twins. One of them stays on the Earth, the other twin goes on the rocket and disappears off for 12 months. Then, when the rocket comes back, the twin who was on the rocket will be much younger. 100 years could have passed on the Earth, but only a year will have passed, say, for the twin on the rocket. So this twin paradox, that is time travel, basically. But it's a one-way time travel. It's just to go into the future. There's no coming back. But in theory, you could go as far into the future as you wanted to, if you could travel fast enough. The closer you get to the speed of light, the more you warp space-time, and the slower time goes relatively for you. So there you go. Time travel proven. Good night, everybody.
See ya. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I mean, Einstein was the first one to really describe time as this plastic thing, that it's not constant throughout the universe. It depends on where you are, what you're doing, how fast you're traveling, and how close to a black hole you are at the time. Which is another thing that we'll probably talk about in a little while, black holes and time machines, and how if you get to a point where actually gravity becomes infinite, time may stop. Do I lick or do I like the button? Well, somebody put they're going to lick the button. Don't lick the button, you'll electrocute yourself. So
it's on the screen, it's fine.
Has anybody else got any other theories on sort of the reality of time before we move on to if you could travel back in time?
With all the experiments going on in CERN, there's a lot of new data, and some of that data kind of tends to drift to ways to travel back in time, at least for particles. Maybe not for you or me, but for specific bosons can maybe possibly reappear back in time. There's one of the experiments I think almost anybody can, well, not almost anybody, you can kind of do in your home if you know what you're doing, is you can take two light emitters, lasers or whatever, and emit light, one through a vacuum and the other through a column of charged cesium gas. Now the light that goes to the charged cesium gas hits the light collector on the other side before the light is emitted from the emitter, because it goes because that light through the charged cesium gas goes multiple times faster than the speed of light. And so if it can arrive before it leaves, then there's something else
Effectively
going
travel
on.
back in time. Yeah.
Right. And so then we have to say, well, is the speed of light the speed of light, or is it variable, or is it regional in terms of where you're at in the universe?
I just want to quickly thank you, Tammy Trott. You've just become a member of my channel, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Go, Tammy!
I'll put it on the spot too much. But yeah, I mean, that's very similar to the Professor Ron Mallett's design as well, that he created this. He's actually built a prototype of the time machine, which I don't think anyone else has ever actually really done. And it might work, but there is some arguments about whether for it to work, it would actually have to be infinite and require. I'm going to talk. Well, we're going to probably talk about negative energy quite a lot as well when we're talking about the actual science of time machines. But he basically has if you bend a laser in a cylindrical shape, and if the laser's strong enough, when a particle goes in one side, it could in theory appear out the other end before it goes in. This works because of something called frame dragging. And then I watched the rest of the video, and my brain went because he started getting into the maths of it and to actually explaining it, and it lost me a little bit. I couldn't understand why just bending a laser in a circle could affect space-time, but apparently if you put enough energy into it, it actually warps space-time and slows particles down. In theory, that's a time machine we could walk through if we could build it big enough and powerful enough.
Yeah, like a time tunnel kind of thing.
Like time tunnel, exactly like real life imitating art. And it mostly works because it's kind of like a wormhole. And it works, and it's like an artificial wormhole. And that is the one way that we might actually be able to travel through time, is if we had a wormhole. Similarly to the twin experiment. If we can actually construct a wormhole that we could stabilize, and that's the big problem, is stabilizing the bugger apparently. But if you could create a wormhole, and you have one on Earth, and you have the other one on the rocket going out into deep space, when it comes back, those two are going to be in different times. One could be at year 1, one could be at year 100. But you could walk between it. So you can actually travel in time between that 100 years.
Like a Stargate
sort of thing.
It
is like Stargate, yeah. It would be like Stargate through time. Stargate traveled through time a few times actually as well.
Yeah, because you're traveling through 2 points in time, but you're staying within the same frame of reality.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just, I mean, that's mind blowing, really. But unfortunately, they did say that to create a stable wormhole might require all of the energy, like all of it, in the universe, sort of thing. So that might be a small problem. The engineering might be a small problem. But I mean, the thing that I always find fascinating, though, is that in this case, scientifically, there's nothing to say that's not possible, and that's amazing. How about sort of like the grandfather paradox? And if we start talking about that a little bit, so the idea that if you built a time machine and you could go back in time and killed your grandfather, you would never be born. So then you could not go back in time and kill your grandfather. But then you are born, so you could go back and kill your grandfather. See where I'm going with that?
Endless realities. Different realities.
Well, I think in terms of the grandfather paradox, I think the science kind of leans toward once you do that, you split off into a separate reality, or you're creating a new reality or a parallel universe based on a differentiating event that you personally lived through. You know, you may go back and kill your grandfather, but you're still alive and you continue on in your timeline. But you create a new one in which the grandfather never existed.
Yeah,
and that goes into the parallel universe theories.
Yeah.
There's also something about I can't remember what it's called now. I've written it down. I can't see it. I've written so many notes and I can't see it. But you can apparently create. It's not a circle. It was in the last Marvel movie. It's this ovally shape. Anyway, apparently, so you can have 2 time frames working at the same, existing in the same space. So in theory, you could go back and kill your father and then you would be existing on the other time frame, but it's still the same timeline.
Right.
But that again, that blows my mind. But I'll try and see if I can find where I've written it down. I'm sure I did. Science has been thinking about this though forever, haven't it? And it's like, is there any reason why we've got an obsession with time travel? It's not like it makes you younger. Do we just all really want to go back in time and see the 1966 World Cup, or?
It's something we haven't conquered. That's why, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been in literature forever. So, I mean, depending on what in translation of the Bible you read, I mean, you can kind of see, well, that's kind of time travel-y, But, it's, at least in modern literature, going back 200 years, I mean, we always wonder, can we go back in time to change things? Can we fix our past's mistakes by traveling in time? And, I mean, it's still prevalent in literature today, and TV shows and whatnot, and here we are talking about it. Can we do it or not? That's something that is...
I think that's where the obsession comes from, though. It's our own psychology of regret, basically. And I mean, I'm sure there's an interest as well. I mean, we'd love to go back and, see past events, wouldn't we? But also there's just that thing that's involved. We just would like to fix things that have gone wrong sometimes.
Plus, there's, the opposite side of the fence is going forward in time, great amounts, to see how humanity has changed or evolved or devolved. It's just like, it's a tool to scratch your curiosity, I think,
If you could go back in time, would you? We'll go around the windows. If you could go back in time, would you go back and kill Hitler? If you could.
No.
I would not. I would rather go to the Library of Alexandria and steal as much shit as I could. Literally.
Yeah.
I mean, go down. I mean, because Hitler's going to end up dead anyway, right? A lot of people are going to die along the way, but we don't know what that unleashes, though. I think after World War II, and I know you guys Brits suffered a hell of a lot worse than the United States ever did the conflict. But I would just go and steal everything I possibly could from Alexandria. I think that would push humanity forward more than killing Hitler twice.
I think I'd go to somewhere like the Eye of the Sahara just to see if it is Atlantis, and just sort of like drop down, see that there's nothing there, and go, knew it, and just come back.
See, it scratches your curiosity.
Yeah, just to see. But yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? That's why, I mean, time travel is so odd, isn't it? That you could change one thing. I mean, it was in The Butterfly Effect, that movie with Ashton Kutcher. Terrible film. But that's the thing. Every time we tried to fix something, something would work and something would go horribly wrong. And I think that's probably what would happen if we ever built a time machine. But Stephen Hawking proved that time machines can't happen, though, because he threw a party and didn't invite anybody till afterwards. And that was his way of saying that, well, time travel can't be true, because if time travel was true, people would have come to my party. Why don't we have time travel tourists?
That sort of holds water only as far as people bringing in any kind of chaos effect into it, as if to say, we were aware of that and we're going to make sure we don't turn up just to be awkward, just to disprove him, just to play games, Yeah. So
aliens and stuff. Is that the one where he kills himself in the director's cut? Have you seen the version of that film where he, as an embryo, he kills himself in the womb? It's pretty dark. Sorry to cut you off, Dave. Sorry, mate. It's just I just saw that and I just remembered that. It into my head. Sorry, but pretty dark movie in the director's cut. What were you saying, Dave? Sorry.
I've totally forgot. You put me off.
Mate. Sorry, but
no, you're all right, buddy. You're all right.
No, it's terrible cutting people off. So rude. So where were we at with that then? So I've lost my train of thought now as well.
Stephen Hawking.
Oh yeah, Stephen Hawking. So
there could be some sort of like temporal prime directive where one of the rules is never go visit Stephen Hawking. You're not to use time travel to go to parties. Here's your mission. Go do it.
Yeah.
Could be something like that.
I always think it's like he's got loads of gizmos in that chair, so he'd like a camera would pop up and take a picture of it or something, But no, my point was that. So why don't we have time travel? back in time is possible, why don't we have time travel tourism? Why aren't we seeing them? Why aren't they coming back and telling us to stop effing up the planet? You know, here's better battery. Use that.
Would you
Stop
want to come back
polluting the
to this time, or well, I don't know actually. It depends, doesn't it? It's a massive. There's a massive amount of time to go back to, isn't there? Or
Maybe that's what the
forward
UAPs are trying to do.
Mm.
Well, I mean, if you believe YouTube, there's lots of time tourists, don't there? Because we see lots and lots of images of Nazis with mobile phones, and there's lots of guys on the internet that proclaim to be from the future.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, that is just movie sets. And, you know, it's just a bloke filming whatever, and these yeah, and then somebody makes it all grainy and you know, says, "Oh, look, it's the future." But
Isn't there a photo, like a set photo of Gandalf using a laptop? I mean, you know, don't think that was in Tolkien's era. I mean, did Tolkien write about Apple laptops? I'm not sure. Don't think so.
hey, you might have done that. You don't know, do you?
No, he'd have been a Windows man, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
Tolkien would have been a Windows guy, surely.
I can see that. Have you ever seen the Chaplin movie, the Chaplin time travel, that was popular a few years ago? It was George Clark. Was it the I'm trying to remember the film, Grauman Chinese Theatre, 1928. There's apparently a lady in the background on a mobile phone, and you can see her with a mobile phone. But it's nonsense. It's not. It's apparently it's like an early hearing aid. It's like a little trumpet. You stick in your ear, all like that, and you can hear. But that was believed.
Yeah, ceramic. So type of ceramic box to collect sound. Hello.
Yeah, exactly.
We hear you.
I didn't interrupt you that time, but yeah. So there's lots of things like that. But I want to talk about this John Titor because he was everywhere in the early noughties. He was a time traveler sent back from 2035. He was a member of the military, and he came back tasked with retrieving an IBM 5100 from 1975. The world in the future had a nuclear war, and all the computer systems had been wiped out by an EMP. And he needed this IBM 5100, the first ever commercially available laptop, that cost like 20 grand or something back then to buy.
Wow.
In like the 80s. 20 grand in the 80s was like 3 houses or something. But it used this special APL language, which literally means a program language. And John Titor said that he needed that computer because it had like a source code on it that would allow them to access all these old files that they couldn't access. Do you guys actually remember that from the noughties? Because it was everywhere back at the time.
I don't
Not
think
really.
I do. No.
It's because it kind of fizzled out quite quickly, but it was really in the early days of the internet. He went on to say that in 2004 there was going to be a nuclear war in America. He also said the Olympics was going to get cancelled, and even COVID can't cancel these bloody Olympics. So so he released a bunch of photos at the time, and there was a prize given out for like, can you debunk these photos? Because he was supposed to be developing photos of his time machine that was built into a Chevrolet, an old 1967 Chevrolet, and it basically, nobody's ever been able to debunk these photos. Nobody's ever been able to prove, you know, that they were faked. So a lot of people point to that and go, "Well,
have you got photos?"
True. Yeah, the nuclear war didn't happen, and that is a small problem. But he said that it had caused splintered timelines. That by the fact that he came back and actually talked about it, meant that it didn't happen. But there was an interesting thing more recently. What they've realised, IBM admitted a couple of years ago that actually there was a source code as part of this original programming, and it was put in there on purpose so that you could read back through older software. And it was put in there, like I say, as a way of debugging systems. NASA's done that type of thing for years. They had a thing where they had to, it was something to do with the Apollo mission. They had to go back and get the computer systems. They had to go get like an old 1970s computer system out of storage because all of the modern systems couldn't read the old computers. They just wouldn't interface, sort of thing. So they had to go and whack out an old system to try and update it. But apparently there's an issue that in 2038, all of our computers that count up in seconds are going to hit 100 billion seconds. And that's a problem with that because they're all designed not to go above that. They don't know how to go beyond it. So we're going to have like a Y2K issue where all these computer systems are just going to stop working.
You say didn't say that about the millennium.
Exactly, the Y2K, yeah. So he seemed to know about that though, but it wasn't released until years later. So there's either two theories that actually he was a time traveler, and this is why he needed that particular system, or whoever hoaxed this, which is probably right, was a computer engineer or maybe even worked for IBM. But it was one of the first big like hoaxes, and people really, really believe this guy. The DeLorean is cooler. It's an old Chevy though, man. Old Chevys are gorgeous. So, but yeah. So what do you guys think about that story? Any water? Especially considering that everything he said was going to happen didn't.
Yeah, I think, once we didn't have the nuclear exchange, that's kind of a big event that you really wouldn't get wrong. I mean, here in America, people can say 9/11 and everybody knows exactly where they were and what was going on. So you'd think that something as globally devastating as the nuclear war would stand out a little bit more. But, if that's... Yeah, I mean, so in terms of like a baseline, if you get that one wrong, gee, what else did you get wrong?
Yeah, he seems to have got a few things right, but he seems to have got just as much wrong. But I think it's one of those things that if you throw enough, it's a bit like Nostradamus to me. If you throw enough and say it vaguely enough, or Mystic Meg over in the UK, just say things really vaguely.
Peg.
Yeah, just say things really vaguely, and then you're gonna, you might get somewhere. But all right, let's talk about some of the technology and some of the attempts to build a time machine, or some of the things we think might be time machines from the past. So we'll start with Nazi Bell. Was that potentially a time machine? The Nazis say they had an engine from a UFO and that it was possibly able to warp space-time and travel through time. Any thoughts?
The whole Nazi Bell story is just fascinating to me. It's like it's a long chain of other stories that are advanced Nazi technology that disappeared, was destroyed, or the Soviets snatched or something. But yeah, that's one of my favorite stories is the Nazi Bell. I don't know much about it. I know just about what everybody else knows. But God, I don't know.
Yeah. The Vril was like aliens and stuff. I just mentioned the Vril. I want to do a video on the Vril sometime, because there is this fascinating story about the sort of the politics behind the Nazi Party in this Vril society. And the woman that was sort of like the head, who was sort of like the witch sort of thing, I forget her name, but she was stunningly beautiful. All the photos of her, she was absolutely stunning. And she also said that at a certain point in history and before the war, she was going to be taken back by the Vril. And then she actually did disappear in 1939. Never to be seen again. But all her friends were kind of high up in the Nazi Party, so that also might have been why.
Kidnapped him.
Yeah. So, but for me, the Nazi Bell, it's become very popularized in modern times, mainly because they say that, well, this is where it was built, and there's this concrete circular place where it was built, and it was chained down, sort of thing. There is even some evidence suggests an item was there and was removed, because we have like a chain of custody as it was being moved from person to person, sort of thing, or company to company as they moved it, as they were trying to get it out of Germany at the end of the war. And then you've got this thing with the Kecksburg UFO, which is interesting. In Pennsylvania in 1965, a bell-shaped object burned its way through the night sky, seen by thousands of people, and crashed in some woodland by Kecksburg. Witnesses said it was bell-shaped. Some people have said have connected that to the Nazi belt. Other people have said it was a Russian satellite, because the Americans did go in and close off that entire forest for like 6 months. So you weren't allowed to go anywhere near where this thing had hit the ground. And then as soon as they left, they sort of went, don't worry about it, it's fine. What did I say? I said Pennsylvania, didn't I? Aliens and stuff. I probably didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried to find that spot before, and you can find Kecksburg, but it's where they had roped off. It's either they built a shopping mall there or something. I don't think the landing spot still exists. I may be wrong about that, though.
It's not one of those shopping malls you want to go in with. A shopping mall, a shopping centre. It's not turning into an American.
We have 3-headed gerbils on sale today.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to go in the basement, though, would you? It'd be like something from bloody Stranger Things or something. It's just like opening the door.
And now I gotta go. Now you say, the tentacles and just bring that shit through New York City. Yeah.
Yeah, man. No, you wouldn't want to buy anything from there.
I think were you talking about Helena Blavatsky? Helena Blavatsky from
something like that, yeah. It's a long time ago I did the research.
Right.
Yeah, but it's just a fascinating story, and whatever happened to her, we don't know. But she disappeared about the same time she said she was going to. So there's been other science and other technologies, sort of like or time travel machines designed through time. There's the chronovisor, which was constructed by Father. Oh God, I do really well with names that are foreign, as we know in this channel. So, Father Pellegrino Maria Anetti. I think I can do Italian. I can do Italian, right? Excellent. It was a 2002 book, The Vatican's New Mystery, by Father Francois Brunet. And apparently this chronovisor was built 100 years ago or something, and it was a real person. But apparently this device could see into the future and into the past. But we have no details about it at all. It's just that it existed, apparently. The Iranians in 2013, the Iranian news agency Fars, thanks like that, right? Actually ran a news story saying an Iranian scientist has built a time machine that can let us see into the future, and that was on the news. And then 3 days later they went, "Oh no, sorry, we didn't." Maria Orsic, I think that's it. So I mean, just a second, sorry. So I mean that was really interesting, and they withdrew that really quickly, and then they went, "No, there's no such machine, we promise." But that was an interesting event that they sort of like. Was it slipped out? Was it like Roswell when they dragged out? They released the news story, and then people in charge went, "Shut up! What are you doing?" Or
possibly.
The Iranians have spent a lot of messing around with nuclear material, a lot. So maybe they created something by mistake, or what do you think? Is that possible?
It's possible. We don't know what they're doing, do we?
No, it's a strange story when I use crystal balls. It's a strange story that they released and saying that it was released by mistake, sort of thing. It's not. But then that gets us sort of towards the Philadelphia experiment. So, 1943 October, Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, the USS Eldridge. Were they trying to build a time machine, a stealth naval ship, using EM technology? Dave, what are your initial opinions on the Philadelphia
Dave,
experiment?
you got anything to say about this, Dave?
Sort of, a lot of that audio was choppy, so just give me a sec because I'll drop the vid. I did send a message in private chat that
I did
I'm
see
getting problems with the audio. Okay, 1 second. Can you hear me now?
We are having audio problems this evening. I don't know what's
I can hear
going
you.
on with YouTube.
I can hear you, Dave.
Oh, you can hear me? I can hear everybody again. Way, there we go. So I don't know what's going on. Philadelphia experiment. Yeah, part of the Project Rainbow thing. Ultimately the unified field theory, basically combining all the forces of nature into a single controllable thing, if you like. but mainly Project Rainbow and Philadelphia experiment as with US scientists using Einstein's unified field theory for dimensional relocation, really, transportation and time travel, as well as stealth technology, and trying to bend light around objects for that stealth technology. And as you said, it was the USS Eldridge, which we've all know come to know and love due to various films. The older one was the better one, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the older one was the better one. And the USS Eldridge, Cannon class destroyer escort. Its numerical was D173, and that was launched in the same year, July 1943. Really to protect cargo ships. So 1,600 tons and 216 crew members, so 15 officers, 201 hands, as it were. And yeah, it was supposedly fitted with generators that were allegedly sucked in matter from 1983, using elements that they used later on for the Montauk Project conveniently, because it was able to get into 1983. They was able to access those elements and created a time wormhole. As we discussed before, a time wormhole connects 2 points in time, 2 separate points in time, but within the same reality. And excuse me. Also, like I say, was which enabled it to enter hyperspace energetic levels, which caused both time frames to link up hyperspatially. How much truth there is behind that is again open to conjecture. But this resulted in it causing a time loop between 1943 and 1983. There was actually 2 experiments that were conducted, and the first one was the one where they rendered the ship invisible, which were allegedly a few witnesses to this event when the ship was actually rendered invisible. Can you still hear me okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, just checking. And then a few days later...
It's your voice, Dave. It's that voice, mate.
a few days later, it was the teleportation, if you like, part of the experiment. So the ship ostensibly jumped from 1943 to 1983, which were powered by these field generators that were taken from third generation technology. That was supposedly a mixture from, they're called Tesla's ideas, and we were just talking about the Nazi Bell, old technology from extraterrestrials.
The way I read it was that initially that it was the design was supposed to be just to render it invisible. It was supposed to be stealth technology.
Originally, that was it again. But you sort of need to look at the people that propagated the myth and legend of the Philadelphia experiment and how that changes, because there is a lot of big players. Carlos Allende or Carl Allen. He was on board the USS Purser, and he said he saw the ship disappear. But he described seeing the shape of the hull due to the water displacement in the dock, even though it was invisible. So you could see if you have, for want of a better terminology, the imprint of the water, the imprint of the ship in the water while it was in dock. And the allegations are that during the transportation, that the Eldridge was like briefly outside the normal framework of reality. So ostensibly that would mean it would travel through a vortex rather than a wormhole because of the change in reality, but it's saying it was just outside the normal framework of our reality. So when crew members moved, either because they freaked out because of what was happening, when they returned to the correct timeline, they ended up embedded in the bulkheads and the stairs and in other objects because they'd moved, but the ship hadn't when it returned back to this reality or back into the time frame of our reality. Now, the crew members who had stayed still due to either being in shock or in awe or something like that were in the same location as the ship when the timelines and realities realigned, so they were largely unaffected, apart from feeling a bit nauseous and headaches and things like that. There was also the skipper, the captain of the USS Antietam, actually made a log entry that he and several crew members described seeing a warship disappear as well. There are other players in it. We'll be here all night if we dwell on these, though. I've seen people mention 1 or 2 in the side chat, like Al Bielek or Ed Cameron, whichever way you want to go. But the brothers Duncan and Ed Cameron, who in many ways are obviously time travelers. Incidentally, a lot of German scientists were allegedly involved with this. They were messing about with this in the early 1930s, so a good 10 to 13 years before the Philadelphia experiment took place. It was Professor von Neumann got Einstein involved in Project Rainbow. But Project Rainbow, which what the Philadelphia experiment was part of, was dealt really with changing time space but staying in the same reality, whereas the Montauk Project dealt with changing time space between different realities. So similar, but obviously not quite the same thing.
There's a lot going on at Montauk, I don't know if we believe these few chaps.
Well, the rumors of the Tesla technology and the captured alien technology to make that third technology was to enable interdimensional and beyond time and space travel, apparently. So they could map out points in time and space where time travel was possible between those said points, which that's how they were thinking it were working. Did you know, like in 1934 as well, Tesla told a reporter from the New York Times that this is while he was working with the Office of Naval Research. That work was underway, again, how much truth is in this we don't know, on a particle beam weapon that could, what he said, could bring down a fleet of 10,000 enemy aircraft 250 miles away. So and there were lots of behind the scenes experiments going on with the US government involving Thomas Townsend Brown, or T. Townsend Brown. Now, Brown thought he discovered a connection between electrical fields and gravity, ostensibly an anti-gravity effect. But that's sort of like been described away as being electrohydrodynamics on the movement of charged particles, so, not quite strictly anti-gravity. It transfers the momentum to surrounding neutral particles in the air, so they know it as ionic drift or ionic wind. And for most of his life, he tried to build devices based on these ideas, trying to get the military to reuse them or industry. And this resulted in a phenomenon that became known as the Byfield-Brown effect. I think they call it, is it electrogravitics or electrogravitronics or something?
Now that's really the anti-grav theories now are really around this EM gravity technology, or GEM.
Yeah, because he was looking into electromagnetism to use it as a form of propulsion, and he was actually using saucer type shapes to levitate in them to sort of like do this kind of thing. Briefly, the Montauk Project, massively propagated by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon. They wrote a book about it. Preston Nichols was very vocal about this, but it came about because of the development of SAGE radar systems, which is semi-automatic ground radar, and Texas Towers. So a massive system all across the US, and I believe some of it was even in Canada. Which operated on between 400 and 450 megahertz, which again, we're back into the realms of allegations, are the frequencies for mind control and altering DNA structure. And they use these SAGE dishes to send commands to satellites, which would then repeat these and relay these commands to other devices, sites, and even individuals. And a lot of these were people that were involved in this were Nazi scientists that were rounded up from Operation Paperclip. So they continued it, like the work of manipulating electromagnetism and gravity, and how you could apply it, magnetic manipulation for use as a weapon in psychological warfare. So the Montauk Project was mainly based around that for the most part. And even it's continuing investigating the unified field theory. It's sort of like, again, alleged that discovered that you could use this, it would make it possible to open time tunnels. Now, these time tunnels could be tailored to send anyone or anywhere in time and space, and they would use remote viewers to get coordinates, to use teleportation devices and time tunnels to drop people into points in space and time. If you want an example of remote viewers, the film The Men Who Stare at Goats. We'll give you sort of like a little insight into that. And these remote viewers, which would use these coordinates, would use these to counteract the effects of celestial mechanics on time travel, i.e., you traveling in time and then the Earth moving, obviously upon its path through the solar system, or rather, around the sun, and then you try to come back and you're not in the same place again, So ostensibly, that's what Project Rainbow, i.e. Philadelphia experiment, was part of that, and what the Montauk Project was about as well. It would probably take an actual stream in itself just to cover them really.
Big subject,
I would say, yeah, big subject, yeah.
To go back to the Philadelphia experiment, though, I mean, the way I read it was that initially it was supposed to just bend light around the ship so that it would turn it invisible. Which obviously, I mean, they're still trying to do that now, but they're doing it with nanotubing and quasi-crystals and things like this. Obviously, it would be a massive, but it would also be invisible to radar. What we're talking about, though, with time machines, time travel, is along those lines. Is if you distort, if you create a strong enough gravitational field, you can affect time.
Yeah.
So, in that respect, it completely makes sense. My only problem with the Philadelphia experiment whole story is I don't think it's true. I don't think any of it's true. I think there was a vessel in Philadelphia Harbor at the time doing magnetic experiments, but it was more to do with minesweeping. And actually how they magnetized the field of the hull to repel magnetic mines. With that going on at the time, that seems to make more real sense to me. When you mentioned remote viewers as well, I had an involuntary roll of my eyes, so I apologise about that.
Well, many children went missing. Allegedly, used lots of children that were trained from a very young age to be able to utilise this kind of, well, not only the technology, these massive generators, field generators, but they were trained just to be remote viewers throughout their entire life. And there's several people, again, have come forward and claimed to be children,
kids,
have come forward and claimed to be a part of that. What I forgot to say as well, did you know there was a fight? There was a fight in a bar in the dockyard where the USS Eldridge, nudge nudge, wink wink, because we all know it's true. Disappeared for a bit, where these two guys just appeared in this bar, much to the chagrin, obviously, of the rest of the patrons, which weren't prone to materializing and dematerializing at will. But allegedly, these two guys appeared in a corner of the room where there wasn't any access, no doors, no toilets, shouldn't have been a room there in the first place, and proceeded to talk about they'd just come off a ship that had disappeared. So it started a little bit of a ruckus. Now, nobody goes into any explanation as to why there's fisticuffs involved and they're all rolling about on the floor with one another. But a little bit of a brawl ensues, and the police are called. Now, before these police can turn up and apprehend the instigators, and these two guys, again, just vanish as if, like, the terminology was they winked out of existence, just completely disappeared out of existence in 1983. In October 1983, which was exactly 40 years from when the USS Eldridge jumped from October 1943. So I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, no, these guys.
I hate to butt in here, but I got a question for Dave concerning all of this. I'm wondering if there's ever been any chat or exploration into the idea of temporal atoms concerning the Philadelphia experiment. Have you ever heard that term?
Yeah.
So for everybody else, a temporal atom in the Bohr's model for chemistry, the nucleus of an atom has an upper limit. You can only pack so many protons and neutrons into an atom and still have the electrons circle it because the electron travels at the speed of light. You cannot have an electron, as far as we know it, that can maintain its existence as we know it. If it goes faster than the speed of light, it just turns into pure energy. So there's an upper physical limit. However, if you modify the temporal mechanics, the time of which the electron travels is still traveling at the speed of light, at least in its realm, and if you can modify that to where the speed of light is different or slower, then you can create larger and larger and larger atoms. Now, I'm just wondering because this is a new CERN, thing that they're theorizing or thinking about. Is this possible? And I was wondering if anybody had really actually looked at this new phenomenon of something beyond the Bohr's model for the periodic table concerning temporal atoms and the Philadelphia experiment.
I think given the time frame that it was taking place in, and allegedly the technology that was being utilized to propagate these experiments into some kind of level of success, I use that term very, very loosely. We're at a stage where it's in its infancy. Quantum mechanics was obviously massively in its infancy then. And Einstein he wasn't a massive fan of probabilistics within the elements of quantum theory. And he said that God doesn't play dice with the universe, so the elements of like guesswork or supposition wasn't around. They didn't have the luxury of the Hadron Collider or any experimentations going on in CERN. Because it certainly doesn't seem to enter into any of the research that I've seen. So whether it was a case of they just simply weren't aware of it, or the correct people weren't in position to talk about it, I would sort of like postulate the fact that it isn't mentioned because they didn't have a clue it was even going on.
Right. I mean, that's kind of my thinking is a lot of these effects that we discuss in the Philadelphia experiment, they are hypothesized if we can go far beyond the Bohr model in terms of atoms. And if you pump so much energy and you start doing some of the things that the military has been doing with material science, then you get a lot of unintended consequences, and a lot of them you have no idea how to even describe mathematically. Yeah. And so I'm just wondering if they stumbled upon something, and now all these years later, somebody at CERN says, well, if you modify the speed of light to go slower, we can make bigger atoms.
Well, I mean, that's what they're talking about with potentially this being related to the Bell, isn't it? Is this some sort of alien technology? Mechanically, we got hold of something mechanical, and then maybe our theorizing is just catching up with something they were playing with. It's very possible.
The theories and data are now catching up with observation.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're saying even if you look at it on a subatomic scale, it's in theory it's possible to transport matter across time and space. You're dealing with the question of mass and the exchange of matter and energy to generate the wormholes or vortices and controlling them to be able to do it. But there lieth the rub, isn't it? Is being able to control it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've already started to teleport atoms. In theory, the Chinese have done it a couple of years ago, and I think the Americans have done it on a small scale.
My brother was working on stuff like that back in university years ago, back in the late 80s. Well,
it's not really transportation, though, is it? Really, it's like the Star Trek. You have to destroy at one end and recreate at the other, but you sort of tag the atom.
Particle teleportation was achieved in the early 90s, I believe, 1994 or something like that.
And I think the Chinese did it literally 2 years ago, but to a satellite. But don't ask me how it works. I always read these papers and go, that's amazing, I can't believe they've done that. And then as soon as it gets to the bit where how they did it, I'm just like, I don't understand. I don't know. My stupid brain.
Same.
I have to get people to explain it to me. New scientists, I can only ever read the first half of the paper. I can't read the rest. But with the Philadelphia experiment, so if that was something that was they've got hold of and they've played with, is that potentially why then we've never sort of seen it again? Because either the experiment didn't do what they were expecting, which is one of the ways we can look at it. If they thought they might be able to turn it invisible, and then actually it disappeared, appeared in Norfolk, it disappeared and appeared 20 years later. It, what I mean? And they couldn't control it. Killed several people potentially. Is that why maybe the technology's not been seen since?
Could have been. I mean, that's like, oh shit, let's not do that in the Chesapeake Bay again.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah. You've just got to look at I don't want to open up a can of worms with this particular one here, but you've just got to look at the argument for not going back to the moon is, well, we don't have that technology anymore. Is it a case of that? They tried it in the 1940s. They moved on from using them particular techniques, kept some of them for the Montauk Project, because you've got the other thing about like altering DNA with these field generators. They're quite happy talking about these field generators that the ship had that oscillated at these particular frequencies that enabled this thing to travel. but also bringing into existent beasts using, you know, some of this technology. Did they call him Junior? I think they nicknamed this particular creature Junior, which manifested within the lab because of these field generators, proceeded to smash up the place. You know, to have a pet name for him, Junior.
Junior.
So is it a continuation of an
Cameron was
idea
supposed
rather
to
than just
create?
yeah?
I think he was supposed to create his mind.
Yeah, Ed Cameron is Al Bielek and vice versa, and so on and so on. You know? I mean, so is it a case of just moving on from that and trying something new, rather than we just don't want to do it? And are they still doing it? We're just not aware of it yet, because when people came forward and spoke about the Philadelphia experiment, it wasn't in 1943.
No,
it
it's a
was
long
30
time
years late, 30 years later. So if they're conducting the same experiments now, are we not going to hear about it until 2030, 40, so on? You know.
And like I said, that they've probably got enough sense now not to commit massive experiments where they don't really know what the outcome's going to be in the middle of a massive naval base. They now do it at places like Diego Garcia or something like that. You're Steve, sorry.
I said health and safety is a bitch nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah. I was joking, that's why we haven't been to the return to the moon. It's not because we can't, it's because health and safety guys are in charge now. We actually want them to survive, is the problem. But yeah, you know, maybe that's why we're at Diego Garcia and places like that, or the Americans at Diego Garcia and places like that, places that are thousands of miles away from anything, and they can do what they want. And if it blipped out of existence for a bit, nobody would even know.
Hey, Dave's back.
Dave's back.
Hey. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
But the Montauk thing, just like,
can you hear me?
Because obviously,
yeah.
Yes, mate, you're with us.
Hello?
I don't think Dave can hear us.
I can hear Dave. I can hear Dave.
I can hear you, Dave. You can't hear us. Oh dear. Turn your camera back off, Dave.
Hello?
Hello, Dave. I can hear you, Dave.
Hello. There we go. What's going on?
On the internet tonight. YouTube, mate, hates us.
We could hear you with your video on, but I don't think you could hear us.
YouTube hates mystery and conspiracy channels. Is what it is.
Yeah, so
that's it, man. We're on a list or some shit.
Yeah, that's it.
Kill us off through glitches. The Montauk experiments, though, at this camp. I mean, apparently they were playing with time travel, teleportation, mind amplifiers, mind control, leading into MK Ultra, weather control, all these things that we've been thinking about ever since, and experiments ever since, like HARP and things like this. We think of playing with things like this. Bring back Dave. Bring back Dave. But the only evidence we've really got that it actually happened is these few guys. You know, the Nichols, Cameron, and so on. The story of how they got together and met is weird. That was as well. That is it. Nichols he's supposed to be the sidekick, and he was. Somebody brought him a device or something like that. I read this morning. It's just really strange. And then they basically were reminding each other. They have all these repressed memories, so they don't actually remember being at the camp. But then years later, they met by accident and they started to sort of remind each other. And it's just a really odd story from beginning to end. But then they built this device that could materialize thoughts. Initially, it was on a TV screen. And then it can actually materialize objects, but it was like light. And then they can actually materialize solid objects. And then they realized that sometimes he would think about a birthday cake in the morning, but it wouldn't appear till the evening. So they were saying, like, okay, well, we're messing with time now, so let's start thinking about time and stuff like this. And it's just a really long list of odd stories. And then they talk about this. They think there was a 20-year vortex. So 1943 to 1963 to 1983, the Eldreds actually appeared. They jumped on it and went back in time and destroyed the device so that it couldn't happen back.
Yeah, they jumped off the ship, and that's how they managed to survive. And one of them jumped off, and that's why the brothers are two different ages. And then one wanted to reborn again. And and I've seen all the different so-called theories regarding the well, I'm going to be polite. The brothers,
yeah. It's just a long list. Isn't one of them supposed to be a reincarnated brother?
Yes.
Somebody as well.
Yeah, I'll be like.
Yeah, it's just a really long list of odd, as far as I can tell. The more I was reading, I think, that's odd. Oh, so is that. Is any part of this normal? The one thing I did find interesting, though, they're saying that psychic powers, he was actually a psychic researcher, and he realised that for 20 minutes each day, all like the remote readers and all this sort of thing were being blocked. Their psychic energy was being blocked, and then they realised that was related to the radar station. That I do find that interesting, because if there is psychic power, it is going to be somewhere in the EM band, I should imagine, some sort of electromagnetic energy or something.
Which is why they were using these generators using UHF frequencies, of electromagnetism. Which is these fields travel at 90-degree right angles to one another and propagate all over the world. Not as much as lower frequency electromagnetic radiating levels do, but certainly enough to bounce around the troposphere and around the world, but with limited range. So you hence they're more likely to pass out into space because they're such a small frequency, in wavelength of a small frequency, in oscillation, the ultra high frequency. So if you imagine seeing them in if you could visualize them 3D as a lightsaber, if you like, the actual waveform, it would be 70 centimeters long. So in the grand scheme of things, that's quite not a massive wavelength. So they pass out. They're not trapped by the Earth's atmosphere. They can pass out into space. So this would make them ideal to relay these particular frequencies of satellites around the world back down to equipment and individuals that could then perform certain tasks. So you start to get into the elements of mind control, because they would imprint other oscillating frequencies upon these frequencies, rather than it being audio, which would be able to allow them to conduct mind control. They would be able to control these operatives to do things. So you start getting into spies controlling people during the Cold War. They even claimed to use remote viewers that could sit at Camp Hero, on Montauk, and spy on the Russians from the comfort of a leather armchair. It's absolutely fantastic if you believe what you're told.
Yeah, a guy named Andrea Puharich did a lot of that early work for the U.S. government concerning not only mind control but remote viewing, and he wrote a paper. This my train of thought starts with this. Like I was thinking about the thermodynamic repercussions of the reincarnated brother. This kind of ties into that. That one thing, Puharich actually published a paper concerning the thermodynamic repercussions of mind control. And he did this, I think it's like, I got a copy of it someplace, like 6-8 pages of math going through how reading or influencing someone's mind psychically has no relevance in terms of thermodynamics. And that's just insanely cool to me. But Puharich was he was a little mastermind running around the CIA and NSA there back in the 40s and 50s.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories about 5G a little while ago, and I met David Icke once, and I do listen to him occasionally, and he comes out with some stuff. He's very entertaining. But he was talking about 5G being mind control. And then I actually looked into how the technology works, and I don't believe it could be mind control, but I suddenly thought that could be mood control, though, because we know EM energy can affect mood. It can also affect, it can make you, there's experiments a few years ago when a guy was doing and changed the magnetic fields, and he could make you believe you were being watched. He could basically make you anxious, and it could do these different things. And so we know that's true. So I worry about 5G a little bit, and not that it's mind control, but it could be mood control. And it could be something just to subdue people a little bit.
I think the theory behind what people with a tin hats, Chris, sorry to respond to it, is that it's actually working more as a Faraday cage rather than an insulator. Stop RF signals going into the brain.
Dave hit that right on the head.
Yeah, it's acting as a Faraday cage.
It's a Faraday cage, not necessarily an insulator or whatever. But yeah, the concerning the 5G. Usually, again, Puharich, he did a lot of experiments figuring out how to adjust mood and concerning paranoia and happiness and all these kind of things. That's typically done at very low frequencies, in the very low frequency range. You know, you're talking about 4.8 hertz, 4.876 hertz, and the high frequency stuff. I mean, we get high frequency stuff all the time from space. I mean, part of the 5G band is Wi-Fi, is the 5 gigahertz frequency range for Wi-Fi. And it's just, I'm having a hard time, believing that, a spectrum that we've been exposed to since, evolution's been cranking, that is somehow, even if it's modulated, can still affect us, when we do know that the physiological component of manipulating humans is on the very low frequency, not in the gigahertz bands.
Yeah, I think the thing with 5G that's a little worrying is that it's such a wide bandwidth that the technology uses. It uses extremely low and extremely high. But you're right. I don't think it goes into the area we'd be talking about that previous experiments on mood control and things like that have gone into. It's just the way it modulates and things. I'm reading it, and I was how 5G works. And I was just taken straight back to sort of when I did my psychology degree, and we were talking about how EM energy can affect the mind. And that's when you start reading some of these theories, and you're like, it's not a million miles away. It is. Yeah. But we shouldn't worry about it. We'll be able to get rid of our internet providers. Virgin Mobile will have no more thing on us. I'll just have my mobile phone. Thank you very much. So the Montauk was interesting for me because I've never really read a great deal about it, but I don't think there's any real evidence that it ever actually happened, other than these guys' witnesses. I think there is some evidence to suggest that the Philadelphia experiment might have actually happened, or definitely we know something did. So what do you guys think? If you had to put your money on it, did the Philadelphia experiment happen the way we talked about tonight?
I believe it was an accident. I believe that they was trying to do a Philadelphia experiment for stealth, basically, for invisibleness. Something happened, or the equipment, the instruments that they were using, they weren't entirely 100% accurate in using what they used, and that's what happened. That's my thoughts on it.
I mean, I kind of think it was they had one objective, and if it occurred, they had one objective, and they stumbled into something else. They had no clue what was going on. Again, I think it started out with anti-mine warfare, and they just, I mean, you put enough energy into just damn near anything, and you'll get all sorts of crazy effects. And I think that's why they decided, well, let's just not do this at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay again. At the most strategic naval base on the eastern seaboard. Let's not do that. And so I think they maybe just stumbled onto something that they really didn't understand, and it's not until recently that we're even getting a grasp on what may or may not have happened.
How about you, Dave?
I'm doubtful that it took place at all. And just because of the complete, people find it difficult to keep their mouth shut, and people have opinions, and this is something that nobody spoke about or talked about for many years, and it's the remit of just a couple of people to come forward with this information. Like I said, you're talking about a Cannon-class destroyer escort ship. This isn't just some little object. You're talking about a massive. It's a fairly visually attracting object, isn't it? A 1,600 ton warship. So I don't know. I find it if it did happen, then I would have to agree with Stormy and Steve there that it would have been an accident if the tinfoil hat, because I'm going to answer you there, Chris, is touching your head or not, doesn't bear anything at all on it, because an antenna needs to be of resonant length relative to the frequency that you're either transmitting or receiving. So if it's not touching your head and there's a gap, the only way it can work is via inductance into your brain. So it would still need to be a radio uses tuned circuits, obviously inductors and capacitors that will oscillate at a certain frequency, which dependent upon which stage of the receiver and or transmitter that it is. So just willy-nilly knocking together a tinfoil hat isn't going to act as an antenna, because that antenna or that tinfoil hat would have to be physically or electromagnetically in tune with the frequency it's about to receive. So unless every single person on the face of the planet knows exactly how much tinfoil to use, then that piece of tinfoil is just going to act exactly like a Faraday cage. It doesn't, whether it touches it or not, it will block out RF coming in unless it's resonant.
Yeah, the wire gaps the wire gaps for a Faraday cage, the gap has to be function to the wavelength. And if you have a solid plate, and it'd be better to be a copper hat instead of an aluminum foil, tin foil hat. And copper would be better for this.
Aluminum.
Then it blocks all radio frequencies. And the thing is, if you got one that mounts here, well, you can still get radio frequencies in through your jaw or whatever. The contact with the skin is not relevant. You can have a going back to Puharich again, when he lived at the Reynolds estate in North Carolina, Devotion, Will Reynolds built him a house. The whole house was a Faraday cage. There were just copper sheeting surround everything in the house. And it was, grounded, it was all connected to ground, electrical ground. And, he could monitor what was hitting the house, through his instrumentation there in his house. He was a crazy guy. But yeah, his whole house was a Faraday cage. Thought that was a bit. We're 14. We're all right.
On the top of which, just the fact that your brain has electrical magnetic energy. Human beings generate DC electrical energy, small amounts of it. Our brainwave patterns and the frequencies at which they operate at, depending upon different conscious states, themselves would act as an antenna. So you still wouldn't need the tinfoil or copper foil hat. You could just directly attack the brain at the relevant frequencies you wish to manipulate. So you wouldn't need an antenna. The brain itself would serve as an antenna, just like a crystal does, with germanium crystals and so on, or galena.
I'm going to say stupid
it
now,
needs to be
but
put to an
isn't
exact size for that frequency.
Isn't calcium also technically a metal? And
calcium is a metal.
Pretty good at actually. Isn't that why if you put your key up to your head and blip your car, you actually get better range because your body acts like an antenna? Is that right?
Oh, well, you could. Well, yeah.
Possible.
You can actually build a microphone out of the surface of your skin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah.
That's the future of phone technology, isn't it? They're talking about stuff that actually is like imprinted into the skin, and your body becomes the battery, your body becomes the antenna.
Yeah, that's right.
You become like a big, like a citrus or potato battery.
Yeah.
Yes, I am, Basil.
Function for the electrolyte. But one thing, talking about the waves and what they can do to your body.
Dave knows everything about radios.
I am a ham radio operator here.
KK4 MIA, great to meet you, Dave.
Mike 0 Sierra Alpha Delta.
I'll put that on my
Happy to meet you too, sir.
Okay, so anyway, concerning low-level frequency stuff that you can do to the body, Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, back in the day when she was teaching college, she had this. She would show what they could do to half the class. So she would set up a transmitter in class, and she's okay. This side of the class is going to be exposed to this frequency. This side of the class won't. She flips this thing on, and everybody on the affected side of the class, everyone's jaw starts chattering. It's just. I mean, they're like skeletons. Their jaws are just snapping back. It was crazy. But yeah, it was. I mean, you get in low frequency, and you can have all sorts of crazy things going on anatomically. But that was the spookiest shit I have ever. I mean, yeah, it's. Damn.
Just one question, guys. What does CQ mean? CQ on radios and stuff like that.
CQ is basically you try to establish a contact. Yeah, so it comes from Morse. da-di-da-di-da-da-di-da. It's easier than saying, I'm trying to get a contact, which would take you half an hour to rattle out your TQ instead.
I always wondered on, oh, damn, what's the film? Oh, God, I can't think. I think it's Jodie Foster, where she goes and
First
visits
Contact.
the alien. That's it, yeah, I think it is, yeah. And
They're all giant squid or something. No, that wasn't. Was it? Was that?
no, that was something else. Yeah, yeah.
Aliens and
Survival,
when Ellie Arroway was a child and was CQing on the radio trying to get the Pensacola. I think it was Contact. Carl Sagan's
Contact. That's
Okay.
it. Thank you, Storm Bear. Yeah. Contact.
Close quarters, that'll do nicely, that aliens and stuff, yeah.
Everyone's going contact.
Contact. I forgot to look at the chat.
Smartest viewers ever.
Exactly. It's a weird film, wasn't it? All these aliens come and they're all bloody squid or something. So, I mean, how have they got opposed? How did they build the spaceship? They're going to have opposable thumbs.
You got
So
to
I
worship
didn't
his
understood that
nuclear
film.
appendage.
Well, I mean, Earth-based octopus. I mean, they can seal themselves in a mason jar. They can escape from a
Yeah,
mason jar.
they are decent. They are.
I mean, they are
Strange creatures.
like there's these lab videos that you can find on YouTube of all the strange things squid are doing or octopi are doing, letting people out of their cage or getting into a tank with their mate or whatever, they are really great thinkers. And so when you have a tentacled monster 40 meters high, who knows what their brain case is like.
Yeah, there you go. And I know their brains are unique as well. They don't actually have like a brain like us, they have more like a very advanced CNS rather than.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'll tell you what I think about the Philadelphia. Remember we were talking about time travel? Do you remember that?
Time travel. We discussed that, I think, some time ago.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably yesterday.
I was hoping it ever did start.
That was tomorrow. Was that tomorrow?
If you are watching this yesterday, well done. But I think for me, the Philadelphia experiment, I don't think it was, but because I generally go back to my cynical days, and I can see how many times the story has changed. And as soon as I start seeing the story change, I start suspecting it's not true. Like I said, it was 30 years after till it was ever released, and then it's just grown over time. But I think possibly the same with the Nazi Bell. But at the same time, is it possible? Oh, hell yeah. If we did have some sort of alien technology from, that we just found in a ground somewhere, we would play with it. And, we would try to make it work. We would pump energy into it. They're talking about how Bob Lazar talking about how they played with it to a point where they blew one up, and things like this. So, yeah, I mean, if we had something like that, would we play with it? Of course we would. So, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah, I think you made a good point, and not so much as far as human beings go, we like to play with toys, and we like to brag about our ability to build them when our neighbours don't have them. It's called keeping ahead of the Joneses at a governmental level, if you like, or at a military industrial level. So I think had something like that gone on, everybody would know about it. I mean, you just got to look through time. When somebody develops something or they have it, they can't help but use it just to suppress, even if it's just in a propaganda level, the ideology of other nations, other people, of their own people, indeed, actually. So I think we would have seen more of it. And I know that flies in the face of what I said earlier, where it's just a case of perhaps we are using it, we just don't know about it yet. Well, I'm hesitant to believe that the Philadelphia experiment happened.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of talking about propaganda. Probably a lot of you guys don't remember, but during the 60s, 70s, 80s, until the Berlin Wall fell, American magazines and news outlets were just consumed with the Cold War. I mean, every issue of like Newsweek or U.S. News and World Report would have graphs upon graphs. How many missiles do they have? How many missiles do we have? How many tanks? I remember they were comparing shoe production. How many shoes does America make per person than the Soviets do? And it was, and sometimes sometimes these were planted stories in American media just to amp up the paranoia of the Soviets.
Yeah.
And since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, I've worked with some guys that actually lived through that. And how in the world were they ever our enemy? This is totally off the beaten path, but I got to tell you this story. Once upon a time, the Soviets were going to build the world's biggest milk production facility because they saw somebody in Wisconsin, I think it was, and that had the biggest one, so forth and so on. So they had to have a bigger one. But in true Soviet thinking, they built the factory, the milk processing place, in the appropriate politically correct place. But no one paid any attention to the fact that, it was near Novosibirsk or something, which is several thousand miles away from the Urals where the cows were. And they also ignored the fact that there was no rail for the last 300 miles. And so they would just load the milk on the carts, in Western Russia, and they would just sit there and spoil because no one had planned to take it to Novosibirsk. And it was like a lot of the Soviet thinking was like that. It's like, how can we one up? And I think their weapons program, as well as the United States, were always a little ginned up, to say the least. Now, the Russians did definitely put a man into orbit first. They did Sputnik, and they have a long list of accomplishments. But those are the few times that their government, maybe it was the scientists really, but their government was accidentally competent. And there's lots of propaganda. And so when you come to propaganda, something like the Philadelphia experiment, that could have just been a plant and the audience was the Soviet Union. Maybe.
The Soviet Union apparently did it the other way, though, as well. The Americans have spent millions of dollars in years, decades even, researching remote viewing, psychic powers, all these sorts of things. There is one theory in that actually that was triggered by the Russians. The Russians leaked out that they had a remote viewer and that they were working on remote viewing. They didn't, but they just wanted to waste America's time as much as possible. And it worked because America spent the only thing that I would question about that is, though, America didn't just spend a couple of years and a few $1 million research and then go, well, it doesn't work. What a load of rubbish. They spent decades
and billions.
Yeah, which then makes me a little bit more hesitant to, even though my natural instinct is remote viewing is to roll my eyes. I'm a little bit hesitant then when you actually talk about, what about time to travel in the hot tub? That's a weirdly great movie. I've just been distracted by that advert because it's such a good film. The sequel, terrible. But yeah, there was so much paranoia between the Russians and the Americans. It really shaped 2 decades, at least. And there was so much psyops going on between them, propaganda and just trying to mess with each other. My favourite Cold War story, though, was the Americans got hold of a MiG-15, I think. And they got hold of this. And then when they went to had a look at the radios, they went, oh, my God, the Russians are still using old...
vacuum tubes.
Vacuum tubes, yeah. So, we're on, more advanced radios. And look how backwards the Russians are. And then somebody pointed out that in a nuclear war, and if this aircraft was hit by an EM pulse, the radio would still work, and the Americans wouldn't. Their transistors would burn out. So the Russians actually had done it on purpose because they were kind of at the time expecting a nuclear war. So they fixed the old radio system.
There's not a lot to that, no.
No, you pump enough.
Old wives' tale, is it?
Yeah, you pump enough EM into any wire, and it's cooked.
Yeah. You're dealing with thermionic valves. They're still relevant to a heat source and voltage. So they have a current grid. The anode still no, it's not going to work. Just having valves isn't going to work.
Yeah, we're sorry. That's the idiotic.
I've
No,
loved
but-
the story for 20
you know-
years. And you just blown it for me.
But the biggest one, and concerning the Soviets started the mind reading meme first, and America during Reagan, I mean the whole Star Wars thing, that Star Wars system was absolutely bollocks, and they were we knew it wasn't going to work, but by God, we spent billions on. We got other stuff out of it, but we had no intention of building this space net but that drove the Russians crazy.
Yeah. Apparently, I'm right and you're wrong, according to Bazza. That's correct. Valves are much more robust than the transistor junctions.
Well, it's not only just the vacuum tubes. You pump enough EM energy into any wire that it will create a voltage, just like any coil or anything. It will create a voltage in the wire, and it's a function of how much EM radiation comes in, exposes to the wire, and then it blows everything else up. The way to defeat EM radiation, at least as we have found it in some of our fighter aircraft, is through the use of fiber optics. Because then you don't have the long stretches of wire in which you can induce a voltage.
Yeah, I mean, you deal with any radio equipment that contains capacitors, as they all do, and then they also store ramp voltage, which is affected by EM pulse and EM radiation. So, sorry, Bazza, I'm still right.
Would it be more effective
valve,
though than old transistor radios?
You can't connect a valve to a cabbage or a potato, and it still needs all the rest of the components to work. Unfortunately, I get your point.
I appreciate that an EM wave would still take it out of them.
Well, there are
more
things
effective than, or more robust, more survivable than the transistor radios. 30 years ago.
I know back when, oh God, this is several careers ago, but I know back in the 80s, you could buy chips that were rad hardened. They were, radiation hardened. They were hardened against them. Maybe not impervious, but they were definitely hardened against them. And I'm guessing they still make those kinds of things. But so you can take preventive measures in IC circuits to at least make them less susceptible to it.
Yeah.
But, transistor, I mean, again, it's not necessarily the component that is that fragile. It's the wires that lead to the component where you generate the voltage. So you have a wire connecting from one place to another, or a trace on a PC board. Same thing. You have a length of conductor that has the ability to have a voltage applied to it, because the EM wave is a frequency. It's not a DC current; it's an AC current.
Okay. Back to time travel. A simple study of the physics involved shows anything moving through time will heat up until it burns away. Okay. I'm sure that's probably there's going to be lots and lots of problems with time travel. Chris, if I'm honest, one of them mean that a lot of the studies that they're talking about, how would we actually do it, the real science, they almost all agree that you would either need, some people, negative energy for it to work, because if you put anything through a proton, it just collapses the wormhole immediately. Or you need infinite-sized tubes. But even though the one did concede, I saw today, scientists did concede, actually a universe-sized tube would probably be big enough to create the vortices for these things. But just to end, before we go, I just wondered, would you rather, just a couple of quick questions, would you rather go, if you had a time machine tomorrow, you fell over at the DeLorean tomorrow and you could go anywhere you wanted, would you rather go in the future or into the past?
Ooh. That's a tricky one.
If I had one trip?
Yeah, go on. So you say you've got one trip, but you can come home. So I'll let you come home.
Okay.
But one round trip. You got one charge.
I'm still going to the Library of Alexandria, stealing as much as I can. Armfuls of scrolls, and I'm hightailing it back to the 21st century.
Yeah, Basil would go back in time. How about you, Dave? Future or history?
Yeah, I would go back in time. I think I would go back in time to the Napoleonic era, because I like military history, and it was obviously there's been major events throughout history that have defined the way that the world is now. And people sort of like usually mention the First World War, the Second World War, and the Cold War, what's affected, where we're at now. But had it not been for the massive gameplays during the conflicts that were raging across Europe during the Napoleonic Wars, we wouldn't be in the position we're in leading up to a unified Germany, which then brought about the First World War, Second World War, so on and so forth.
You want to go see Waterloo or
yes,
Drake's, the Armada battle against the Spanish or something like that. Some of these seminal
you
moments.
absolutely nailed it with Waterloo, brother.
Yeah. How about you, Steve?
I'd like to go back to the late 1700s or the second half of the 1700s. It just fascinates me. Just the building work, the architecture as well.
Don't ship tea to the Americas.
But I think going.
Oh God! Sorry, just seen that on the screen. The big, it's like that's
Big
exactly
ABBA
it.
fan.
I'm into ABBA. That's it.
That was the dirtiest laugh.
Brilliant.
That was such a dirty laugh. I love it.
It just tickled me. That tickled me.
Is that my hair?
Yeah. I wouldn't want to go back in time in a million years.
I wouldn't want to go into the future.
That might be good.
I think.
Just watch Jurassic Park, mate.
I think it's possible. Time travel's possible. I don't know if anybody's heard of the Einstein Rosen bridge, which is basically
it's
the
all
concept.
Marvel movies.
Experimental quantum physics, which people know it as a wormhole, which, like I said before, in theory connects 2 points in the same reality. And Einstein connected a couple of different concepts together, actually, of quantum mechanics and classical field physics, with somebody saying if you look at basic physics, you need to come away from basic physics, actually, for it to make any sense anyway. But if you join the concepts of quantum mechanics and classical field physics, came up with a theory that space and time are a single thing, an interlinked entity, really. And because the speed of light ostensibly being the speed limit of the universe, if you like, in so much as the faster that you try to go, the less you move within time. So say, for instance, like a photon doesn't have any reference within time because time stands still for it because it is traveling close to the speed of light. So, when you come up with a wormhole, which is a hyperdimensional anomaly in space, because space-time is curved, that explains how gravity works. So when you're dealing with the physics, as Chris says, I believe, like classical Newtonian physics, the idea is that like two astronomical or really large bodies in space would proportionately be affected by the sum of the parts of the mass. However, Einstein said that gravity was actually a distortion in space-time. So the idea of a wormhole isn't not just that it cuts through three-dimensional space, but is actually three-dimensional warp in a four-dimensional space. So he doesn't play a part of it due to mass. Because what we call mass is mostly energy. And because they're both interchangeable, and most matter's like 99.999% empty anyway, with the application of the correct kind of energy in the right kind of way, time and dimensional travel is possible.
I would say time travel is possible from the point you build a time machine. And it seems to me that that's where most of the real thinking goes, is that we can't have time tourists because you can never go back before the point you built the time machine. But once you build a time machine, all bets are off. Then you can go backwards and forwards and whatever you want.
So that pause, that gap after I finished saying what I was saying was really ominous. I was almost tempted to get my coat. I'm trying to say something wrong there.
No, it was just so interesting. It takes a second for our brains to catch up. I had this. I wrote a book once. I actually wrote more than 2 words in a sentence, and the idea was that it was. I invented this thing called a chronometric temporal transceiver, and all it was. It's not based on any real science, so don't rip this to shreds. But all it was basically a quantum singularity, and it basically was like out of time. So any information you transmitted through the quantum singularity by making it vibrate, that was what happened in the book anyway, could be read at any point in the machine's history. So the idea being that you could like invent the perfect mousetrap. So you could have your chronometric temporal transceiver, spend a year designing the perfect mousetrap, but then transmit the information into the device. And then from your point of view, from day one, you just get the plans for the perfect. The mousetrap you've just been designing for the year. You then spend the next year improving it, do it again. But from your point of view, all you actually get as soon as you turn the temporal transceiver on, you just get, billions of a massive human capability of knowledge, like instantly. So you could just jump ahead 1,000 years, 100,000 years, and that was the idea of my story.
That kind of smells like entanglement.
Yeah,
kind of.
It would. Well, it would be. I suppose. I suppose it would be. I didn't know about that back then because that's evil and witchcraft. But I didn't know about that back then. But yeah, I could not get my head around the science of it. But yeah, so humanity just leapt ahead 1,000 years in technology in like no time at all because of this device that I'd built in my head. An oximeter. What's an oximeter, Dave?
An oximeter, it's not spelled that way, but an oximeter is what measures your pulse and your oxygen saturation within your blood. The device you put on your finger is what I know as an oximeter.
Yeah.
Pulse oximeter. Yeah, it's
I should know that. I'm a fucking mental health.
We don't want to say anything, Jamie, but yeah, this is your Ballywick.
An oximeter measures gravy, I think.
Does it?
Absolutely correct.
Just, I might spoil the stream by saying this, but what about the Simpsons? They seem to predict. They seem to predict quite a lot, don't they?
Well, yeah, I think Jay has that right. What are they? 20? How many seasons has that thing been going on?
It's over
20 some
right now.
Almost 30. I mean, you write 23 episodes for 20 some seasons. You got to talk about damn near everything.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Some of them are creepy, and you do go, Donald Trump on an escalator as president. That's weird. No one saw that coming. But yeah, it's monkeys on typewriters. You throw enough crap out there, some of it's going to stick. Personally,
I had to throw that in.
Yeah. To go back to the question of would you go forward in time or back in time? I would never go back in time. The water was terrible. Everyone's teeth was disgusting. The food was awful. You died at the age of 30. I'd have been dead 15 years.
You can take your own food, take a picnic with you.
You'd have to, wouldn't you? So just don't drink the water for the love of God.
Trail bars, yeah.
Now, I'd want to go into the future. I want to know where we are in 100 years. I'm just not promising I'd come back.
You might have to. There might not be anything there.
Yeah, I might get there and it's just a burnt out husk. Oh, damn it!
Well, that didn't go well.
But at least I'd know, and I think that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to go into the future. I want to live to be. And actually, what I want to do is the one thing that might actually be physically possible. But yeah.
Well, we do say it's probably easier to go into the future than back.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I adore history. History was always my favourite subject when I was a kid. I also know that a lot of history is about perspectives. I'd love to go back to certain events and actually see what really happened, because the whole thing about history being written by the victors, and I'd love to know certain things, how it really went down. And actually speak to people and go find out what were their motivations for certain things. But if I only had one shot,
is there any chance of being modded?
What's that?
Moderated
on the channel, on the stream.
On the channel,
right.
yeah.
I thought you are a moderator, aren't you, Dave?
No. If I make a comment, can you mod me up? I'll speak to you later about it.
Oh, okay, go on then, mate. Yeah, that's fine.
I'll make a comment now.
Okay. We'll speak to you in a minute. All right.
The reason is you say that about the teeth and the water, and it's very, very. And since you're right, you're totally correct, and it's sort of changed my opinion 100% now, actually, about that, given the bad dental hygiene and everything else. I'd like to go forward in time, and I know that this is fiction, but to Buck Rogers 21st century type time, because it was she called Wilma Deering. Yeah. But that's where I'd like to go, forward in time. I mean, ostensibly, we are all time travelers, aren't we? I mean, we're in a linear fashion, and we're only ever moving forward.
Yeah.
But we're already doing it now.
Yeah, most
Australia's
definitely.
way out there.
And I want a hoverboard. I want a flying car. I want all the things that have actually been promised. You know, and I want to download myself into a robot and live forever. And
If
that
it
ain't
was
happening.
anything like tomorrow as well, we'd already be doing it, wouldn't we? I used to love
Yeah.
that program, but my God, they just got
Missed
me
it, though, didn't
so hyped up for flying
Which
cars
program
and
was this, Steve?
UK Tomorrow's World.
Yeah, it was a TV
around
show.
about the 80s, 90s, I think, wasn't it?
I'm not sure what the American version would be, but yeah, it was a TV show. It was all about science and what looking into the future. So what's coming next? So it would be that TV show in the 80s that in the 90s we're going to have flying cars and and you know the House of Tomorrow.
And the
but
PCs.
Baz is bang on there though when I'm talking about being downloaded. Mr. Musk, Elon Musk is trying to do it.
Well, I'll tell you that Neuralink is some pretty fancy technology. That's just, I mean, just what he's done with the pigs alone is amazing.
It's amazing in that what it can do, connecting like false limbs and things, which is what he says is his design, what he wants to do. But we're going to get into an area of potentially downloading information into the brain, which might be possible. If you can transmit information, we're looking at the Matrix type style of plugging in and just downloading. Hey, goes a new language. If that sort of thing's possible, and then how do you know what's in control if you're plugged into one of these things? Are you in control, or is the system in control?
Well, once you get into symbiosis, man, you can't answer that question.
Exactly, and that's what's scary. But I think almost every piece of technology ever, the more amazing it is, the more terrifying it is, as well. If it was used in the wrong.
Right. The reason it's terrifying is because we know what we do with it. You know, there'd be somebody out there. Oh, well, how can I do this? How can I really screw over people? You know, because that's who we are. You know, we find we have this great new gadget, airplanes. Let's attach bombs and guns to it. You know.
Yeah.
No, it's terrifying, isn't it? That's the truth of humanity. Everything we do. Look at like bioengineering, nanotechnology, so on and so on. The amazing things we can do with that technology, and the terrifying things we can do with that technology. Yeah. It's just anyway. Right, guys. Okay. Thank you very much for a lovely evening.
Great to meet you, Stormy.
Fascinating conversation.
Great to meet you, Steve. Great to meet you, Dave.
Yeah, you too, brother.
It's been another emotional one. So Group Dave, a big virtual hug. Any ideas what we're doing next week, Dave, on Mystery Machine?
Yeah, I've got a couple of ideas.
Are you going to leave us on the?
Well, only for a short while, but I have got. There's so many that I want to do that it's starting to get ridiculous now. It's bubbling out of my ears with them because there are so many, and I'm sort of like torn between doing ones where people have heard of them and can be more interactive in the side chat, or really start to whack in some out there, like not so well known ones. Because I kind of like the interaction with the side chat. I like the way that people can get involved when they've heard of it, and I'm obviously not trying to second guess people's knowledge of the unknown and the paranormal or whatever, but there's some that I've obviously far more known than others. But yeah, fantastic. It's not going to be UFO related, put it that way, people. It's going to be spiritual, paranormal, if you like, ghosts.
Nice.
Hey, Duff is another really good friend of the channel, and mate, you are all three of you, all individually, you're always welcome. Very knowledgeable, really good channel, guys. If you can go find that, please do. So please go and subscribe to SciWorks, where our good friend Stormbear, his real name, comes from. Again, a great channel. It's not in the description at the moment, but it will be a bit later because you very kindly jumped on last minute with us, Storm. So again,
you're very, very welcome. Really I love to hear myself talk.
And we love hearing you talk, even if you can't say aluminium properly. And sorry.
Put that
Dave,
one on the sidewalk.
Thank you.
I'm going to start referring to it as an atomic number. Screw you guys.
Yeah, there you go.
Fantastic. Storm is also my hero. April's going to go jump in the hot tub, and we're all going to go join her.
Woo-hoo.
So
yeah,
please go
Yeah,
subscribe to Stranger Times. You're pushing up towards
Behave
1,000,
yourself,
sir.
Steve.
Yeah.
Fantastic work.
Cheers, Dave.
Yeah,
And
behave
Dave-
yourself.
Always looking after me. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Steve. And everybody in the side chat. It's been great. You guys make it. And the support is absolutely overwhelming. Thanks for being involved and listening.
Thank you
Cheers,
all.
Thanks,
guys.
Danny.
Thank you
Thanks.
Thanks,
all. Love
guys.
and peace.
See you next time.